Okay, there we go. All clean and all gone. Yep, now they'll stop complaining about that and instead find new physical attributes to complain about and not talk about the subject of the video. Okay, sounds good. Let's get to work. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Pins and Axles. I'm your host, Eljay. Oh goodness, he took off his beard and now he looks like a much younger and somewhat more attractive Mike Myers. Johnson. Thank you all very much for joining me. Today we're going to be talking about our favorite toy line, that being Lego. More specifically, well, BIONICLE. Now, originally this episode was supposed to be talking about when story affects the sets. Unfortunately, due to scripting issues and time delays and constraints and stuff like that, we're not going to be talking about that today. That will be next time. This time, however, we are going to be talking about yet another highly debated and quite heated discussion, and that being form versus function. Let me go ahead and explain. Here. It's been a long-standing debate as to which of the following make a better set. Is it form, how the set looks, or function, how it plays? Today, we're going to do our best to look at this as objectively as possible in order to figure out which may make the better set. Of course, personal preference is always a thing, but we're going to try and take that out of the equation. Let's start with function. A function, as so defined by various online sources, is, quote, the special purpose or activity for which a thing exists or is used. Contrary to popular belief, it does not stand for fun action. Some close-to-home examples of functions that we're used to would be the lunging function of the Kanera or Moaka, or more commonly, the gear functions seen by the Toa sets released between 2000 and 2005, and 2015 to 2016. Functions allow for a massive amount of play value, letting fans of the series reenact important moments of the story or have a fun time playing with or against friends, or if you're like me, alone. While it's somewhat unrelated to a set-based discussion, these play features would often come into play story-wise as well, and for a great many people enhance their experience with said sets. Of course, we will talk more about that in the next episode. One of the most important functions, while often not considered in this discussion, would be the mask knockoff feature. This, combined with gear functions, create a fascinating relationship between the two play features. It's something that many fans think back on fondly as they battle friends or siblings in an attempt to knock the masks off their opponent. Or, once again, if you're like me, throw it up into the air and see how long it takes before the mask pops off and it lands on the ground, breaking in several pieces because it's concrete and you're an idiot. On the flip side, however, the largest con against functions is based entirely in appearance. Usually speaking, functions will either have to be vital to a set's construction or added on to it. If it's part of the construction, oftentimes you'll have gears or gaps in odd places, which lead to an often unfinished look. If it's added on, then you will have an additional contraption which may not flow or work with the rest of the set. In both cases, these functions will oftentimes decrease the visual structure of any given set, depending on the function it utilizes. Moving on, let's discuss form. Form is a term used to describe sets that forego functions with a primary focus on articulation. Sets of this description became the primary variant starting in 2006, and is most commonly associated with the Paraka and the Inika builds, which were some of, if not, the first Bionicle canister sets to completely lack function entirely, yet have the new standard points of articulation, in addition to yearly launchers. Sets with focus on form oftentimes have more unique armor, and differ to varying degrees from each other, and due to the massive amount of articulation, they are far easier to pose in creative and dynamic poses, allowing for the setup of engaging and entertaining fight scenes for play, display, or, most notably, stop-motion animation. One of the biggest issues that people have with form sets is that they lack a lot of the interest and play value that the sets with functions have. Since they lack functions, they have to make up for it with differing builds, and more commonly the given blaster of that year and or wave. A large gripe people have with said blasters is that they feel like it takes out the creativity of having a function, and instead replaces it with a generic, one-of-many slap-on tool that lacks character. The two sides of this are really quite simple to sum up. One side believes that since these are toys, functions should take the priority to make the set more fun to play with, and therefore more enjoyable and an overall better value. The other side believes that if the functions degrade the look and general functionality of the set, or reduces mobility, then it's a detriment and a decrease in value. Some of the primary examples on both sides are fairly iconic sets. The two main talking points are usually the Toa Mata from 2000 and the Toa Inika from 2006. With regards to the Mata, folks usually like them for a few reasons. they're either A, they grew up with them, B, they enjoy the vibrant colors and easy functions, or C, prefer the consistent aesthetic that the golden years are known for. Whatever the reason, they are often heralded as enjoyable, decent figures, if not outright excellent canister sets. However, people have good reason to dislike them as well. The Toamata had loose functions, with their arms, or in Pohatu's case, legs, flopping around without any friction. There were methods to stop them from moving, however they were not usually a stock method of going about it, meaning that the pieces needed to be gotten elsewhere and weren't a natural part of the set. In addition to the functions flopping around, the masks would often come loose as well, and constantly came with a threat of being easily lost. But in the end, what is generally considered to be their greatest flaw is their sheer lack of articulation. With only an average of 7 points of articulation, the Toamata and, by default, Toa Nuva were difficult to pose. Dynamic poses did not come easily, and oftentimes fans of the figures would modify them with additional pieces in order to improve that aspect of them. While the Toamata are remembered fondly, those aspects should not be forgotten. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Toa Inika are remembered quite fondly for their abundance of articulation. They function more so like action figures than other sets, which largely led to the overall title of Construction Figure, which stands for Constructible Action Figure. While the Toamata usually had 7 points of articulation, the often titled Inika build had an average of 13 points of articulation. This allowed for movement in their knees and elbows, and gave way to far better and dynamic posing. The Paraka and Inika were praised for the new standard, and many appreciated their additional compactness, which is due to the lack of gears or functions, and because of that, it made them look more sleek and limber. However, at the same time, the Inika were torn down because of their awkward proportions, and for being a gateway to lesser creativity in the mocking community. Because they became the standard, they essentially became a template for many to use on their own creations. A fair amount of the mocking community shunned builds using this design, deeming it lazy and uncreative. In addition, the new figures were attacked for having blasters in addition to a melee weapon. Many believe this to be boring and outright lazy, as before Toa would either have 2 melee weapons, a large melee weapon, or at least 1 unique melee weapon. And boy, don't get anyone started on Kongumari. Oh goodness, the poor guy. Now that we've covered both sides of the conversation, let's get down to answering the title of this video. Which is better, form or function? The answer, and go ahead, cue the emotional music and the groans from the majority of the BioTube community who expect a lowly TTV member to say this, is both. Both? I don't hear you say. How can it be both, you cop-out? Why didn't you give me the satisfaction of it being one or the other so I can win arguments with people, huh? The reason I say this is because we have seen both work in unison. Let me explain. Come on, let's get the cutaway over here. A lot of you G1 fans may be thinking of the Toa Metru, who used to hold the title for the best mix of form and function. They retained a gear function which wasn't very intrusive, while also having the most amount of articulation we had seen at that point. And honestly, I would still say they hold that title for Generation 1. However, we have since been introduced to, and here we go, the Masters. Okay, come on, calm down, let me explain. Relax, I know, Shilling G2, come on. Back to the cutaway. Yep, I know, there it is. TTV once again shilling Generation 2, despite disliking it, despite liking it, despite disliking it, despite liking it, besides... You know what? Forget it, who even cares anymore? In any case, the Masters are widely believed to be some of the best Bionicle canister sets we have ever seen. They have all the pros from both styles, using a gearbox that integrates somewhat nicely with a standard 13 points of articulation. They also lack launchers, opting for more traditional weapons which promote the Toa's different elements and styles of combat. They seamlessly combine both form and function with very few of the cons. Of course, they aren't perfect, don't get me wrong. Many believe that the gears still stick out and look weird, which isn't helped by the fact that they're all yellow, and that only really works for Gali and Liwa Master. In addition, the shoulders are generally too far back, because the gearbox has to stick onto a natural CZBS torso. However, they do have gears that don't conflict with posing, and the function is a classic yet modern design. To many, a solid argument can be made that the culmination of all these years is Akimu the Mask Maker from 2016, seeing as he has the gearbox on the back, as well as hip articulation from 2016, and all the points of articulation. Granted, he's not perfect, but the argument is out there. and of course, at the end of the day, this is all just personal preference. Some prefer articulation, allowing them to pose and even display sets a little bit better, and others prefer the function, allowing them to play and enjoy the set and get some sort of a value for whatever price point they have. Of course, if you're a kid, you might not really care either way. What do you guys think? Do you guys prefer form? Do you guys prefer function? And what are your thoughts on the Toy Masters? Feel free to let me know either in the comments below or on the TTV message boards at board.ttvchannel.com. I've been your host, Eljay Johnson, and thank you all very much for watching. Join me next time when I go over when story actually does affect the sets. Once again, thanks for watching, and we will see you all then. Farewell!